This is a true story shared on a Bigfoot discussion forum in 2007. It was the end of winter, and the snow was still heavy on the ground. Lucy, Ben, and Jacques had been planning their getaway for months. They were looking for something different, something off the beaten path. After hours of searching online, Jacques stumbled upon a strange forum post about an old, abandoned ski resort in the mountains of the US. It was far from the usual tourist spots, and no one seemed to have visited in years. But the idea of exploring a forgotten place filled with mystery intrigued all of them. "It's perfect," Jacques said, showing his friends the post. "We'll be alone, no tourists, no crowds, just us and the mountains." Ben, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "Sounds a little too perfect. Abandoned places can be dangerous." Lucy, always up for an adventure, smiled. "Come on, Ben. It's not like we're going into a haunted house. It's just a ski resort." So, with a little hesitation from Ben, they made plans. A few days later, the three friends were driving through the snow-covered roads, heading into the mountains. The further they went, the fewer signs of civilization they saw. The trees were thick and the air grew colder. They reached the base of the mountain just as the sun was beginning to set. "This place feels remote," Lucy remarked, looking around at the barren landscape. The ski resort had been a popular destination once, but now it seemed like the world had forgotten it. They arrived at the old cabin, a small, weathered structure just outside the resort. It looked like it hadn't been used in years, with broken windows and a door hanging off its hinges. But it was sheltered from the wind, and the view was breathtaking. "We'll make it work," Jacques said, leading the way inside. The cabin was dimly lit, with dusty furniture and cobwebs in the corners. It smelled musty, but it wasn't anything they couldn't handle. After they unpacked, the three friends decided to go for a walk around the resort. The ski lifts were rusted, and the building stood empty, frozen in time. It was eerie, but strangely beautiful in the fading light. "Imagine what it must have been like here when it was open," Lucy mused, her voice echoing in the stillness. "I bet it was packed with people." Ben looked around, uneasy. "I'm starting to get a bad feeling about this place. It just feels wrong." But Jacques, ever the optimist, laughed it off. "It's just an old ski resort. It's abandoned now, but it's still an adventure." That night, they settled into the cabin, cooking a simple dinner and enjoying the peace. The fire crackled in the fireplace, and they laughed at their adventures so far. But as the hours passed, an unsettling feeling began to settle over them. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. The sounds of the forest were distant, almost muffled by the thick snow. Later, as they were preparing for bed, Lucy looked out the window. Her breath fogged up the glass as she peered into the darkness. "Is it just me, or does the night seem too quiet?" she asked. Ben was already lying on the couch, half watching the fire burn low. "It's just the weather," he muttered. "We're in the middle of nowhere. It's bound to feel a little eerie." Jacques, still excited about the adventure, was already half asleep. "It's all part of the charm," he said with a grin. But deep down, none of them could shake the feeling that something was off. The mountain seemed to be holding its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. And that night, they would come to realize just how right their instincts were. The fire in the cabin had burned down to glowing embers, casting flickering shadows across the wooden walls. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving an eerie stillness in its place. Lucy, Ben, and Jacques had settled into their sleeping bags, bundled up against the cold. The night felt heavier than they had expected, the kind of silence that seemed unnatural. Lucy lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Something about the abandoned ski resort unsettled her. During their walk earlier, she had noticed how untouched everything was. No fresh footprints in the snow, no signs of life at all. It was as if the place had been frozen in time, completely forgotten. She turned over, glancing at Ben, who was lying on the couch with his arms crossed. His eyes were closed, but she could tell he wasn't asleep either. "Ben," she whispered. He opened one eye lazily. "What? Do you think it's weird that no one ever tried to rebuild this place? I mean, ski resorts are valuable, right?" Ben sighed. "Maybe it was too expensive. Maybe the weather up here is worse than we thought. Abandoned places happen." Jacques, half asleep on the floor near the fire, mumbled, "Or maybe it's haunted." Lucy rolled her eyes. "I'm serious. This place doesn't even feel like it was closed naturally. It feels like people just left in a hurry." Ben didn't answer right away. He had been thinking the same thing earlier, but didn't want to say it out loud. Something about the empty resort, the untouched snow, the way the air felt heavy. It was strange. "We're overthinking it," he finally said, pulling the blanket up over his shoulders. "Let's just sleep." Lucy sighed and lay back down, but sleep didn't come easily. The night stretched on in silence. At some point, the temperature inside the cabin dropped noticeably. Lucy shivered and pulled her sleeping bag tighter around her body. The cold was biting, sharper than before. A sudden sound made her jolt upright. A creaking noise. She held her breath, listening. The cabin was old, and wood expanded and contracted in the cold. It was probably just that. But as she strained her ears, she could have sworn she heard something else. A soft crunch like footsteps in the snow outside. Lucy glanced at Ben, but he didn't move. It was nothing, she told herself. Just the wind shifting the snow. After a long moment, she lay back down and forced her eyes shut. The rest of the night passed without incident. But when morning came, she would remember the sound, and she would wish she had paid more attention. The morning sun filtered through the cabin's small windows, casting pale beams of light on the wooden floor. Lucy sat up in her sleeping bag, stretching her arms, feeling the stiffness from the cold night settle into her bones. Ben was already awake, stirring a pot of instant coffee on their small camping stove, while Jock was still curled up, snoring lightly. "Morning," Ben muttered, handing her a tin cup filled with steaming coffee. "Morning," she replied, taking a cautious sip. The warmth spread through her, but the uneasy feeling from last night still lingered. "Sleep okay?" Ben asked. Lucy hesitated before shaking her head. "I don't know. I thought I heard something outside last night. Footsteps, maybe?" Ben raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Instead, he turned his attention to the cabin door. "Want to check outside?" Lucy nodded. She pulled on her coat and the two of them stepped onto the porch. A crisp morning breeze blew past them, sending a shiver down Lucy's spine. The snow stretched out in all directions, untouched except for the tracks they had left the day before. But something was wrong. Ben froze. "Lucy, look." She followed his gaze to the side of the cabin. There, in the fresh snow, were tracks, large, deep footprints. Not human. They were spaced far apart, as if whatever had made them had taken enormous strides. The pattern was strange, too big to be from a bear, too deep to be from any ordinary animal. The tracks started near the tree line and led directly to the side of the cabin. And then stopped. Lucy's throat went dry. "Something was out here last night," she whispered. Ben crouched down, running a hand lightly over the edges of one of the prints. "It's fresh. Whatever it was here a few hours ago." A chill ran through Lucy, and for the first time, she felt an undeniable sense of unease. She had come here expecting an abandoned ski resort, a fun adventure with friends. But standing here now, staring at these impossible tracks, she felt something else. They were not alone. Behind them, Jacques stumbled out onto the porch, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" Ben stood up, brushing the snow off his gloves. "We might have a visitor." Jacques frowned. "Visitor? What are you talking about?" Lucy pointed at the tracks, watching as Jacques' expression shifted from confusion to concern. "That's not normal," he muttered. "That's big." Ben nodded, and it was close, really close. The three of them stood in silence, staring at the prints, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The air felt heavier now, charged with an unspoken fear. Finally, Jacques forced a chuckle. "Okay, so maybe it's just an old prank, someone messing around out here before we arrived." Ben didn't look convinced. Maybe, but Lucy knew better. Something had stood outside their cabin last night. Something big, and it had been watching them. She just didn't know why. The three of them stood in silence, the weight of the morning chill mixing with a growing tension in the air. Lucy hugged herself, trying to push away the nagging feeling in her gut. The tracks in the snow were unlike anything she had ever seen, and the fact that they led to the cabin but didn't continue away sent a fresh wave of unease through her. "All right," Jacques finally said, exhaling sharply. "Let's be rational about this. Maybe it was some kind of large animal." Ben gave him a skeptical look. What kind of animal walks up to a cabin in the middle of the night and just stops? He gestured to the tracks. No return prints. No sign of it circling or leaving. It came here, but where the hell did it go? Jacques frowned, rubbing his hands together. Snowfall could have covered up the rest of the tracks. Ben shook his head. The snow stopped hours ago. These prints are fresh. Lucy's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, which had long since gone cold. I don't like this. Ben sighed, standing up straight. All right, we're not going to get any answers just standing here. We need to look around, check the area. Maybe we'll find something that makes sense. Jacques groaned. Or we could just ignore it and get on with our day. Lucy shot him a look. You really want to pretend we didn't just wake up to this? Jacques hesitated before shaking his head. Fine, but let's be quick. They split up slightly, each keeping close to the cabin as they scanned the surroundings. The old resort lay silent beyond the trees, a skeletal remnant of a forgotten past. The broken-down ski lifts stood like rusted ghosts in the distance, and the silence was almost too complete. No birds, no wind, nothing but their own breathing and the crunch of boots on snow. Lucy's heart pounded as she followed the tracks to the very edge of the clearing. The footprints were enormous, but the oddest part was how they just ended, as if whatever made them had vanished into thin air. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. Guys, Ben called from a few feet away, his voice tense. Come look at this. Lucy and Jacques hurried over. Ben was standing near a tree, staring at something in the bark. As Lucy got closer, her stomach twisted. Deep scratches, 4 long gouges ran down the trunk, as if something massive had raked its claws through the wood. That's not an animal, Jacques whispered. Ben exhaled slowly. I don't know what it is. Lucy felt her breath catch in her throat. Maybe we should leave. Jacques laughed nervously. Come on, Lucy. We just got here. She turned to him, eyes sharp. And something was here last night watching us. Ben stepped back from the tree, glancing at the tracks again. Let's not jump to conclusions. We don't know what we're dealing with. But we are dealing with something, Lucy pressed. Jacques ran a hand through his hair, clearly unnerved. Look, let's not freak ourselves out over nothing. We came here to camp, so let's just focus on that. Lucy didn't argue, but as they turned back toward the cabin, she couldn't shake the feeling that they had already made a mistake by coming here. And whatever had been outside last night, she had a feeling it would be back. The day passed slowly, yet the unease that had settled over them that morning never truly faded. Lucy, Ben, and Jacques tried to go about their plans as usual, collecting firewood, exploring the surrounding area, and setting up a small outdoor cooking spot. But the lingering mystery of the tracks and the claw marks remained in the backs of their minds. As the afternoon stretched on, the overcast sky dimmed earlier than expected, casting long shadows over the abandoned ski resort. The remnants of the once thriving location stood eerily still, chairlifts dangling lifelessly from rusted cables, old ski lodges sitting silent and forgotten, their broken windows like hollow eyes staring out at the snow-covered expanse. Feels like we're the only people left on Earth, Jacques muttered, kicking at the snow. Lucy hugged her arms. Yeah, kind of makes you wonder why this place was abandoned in the first place. Ben, who had been studying the remnants of a collapsed building, turned back to them. Officially, lack of tourism and harsh winters. But, he hesitated. But, Jacques prompted. Ben exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. I found an old forum a few days ago. People who used to live nearby said this place was cursed, that strange things happened here long before it shut down. Lucy frowned. Strange how? Ben glanced at the surrounding trees before lowering his voice. Disappearances. Jacques rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. I'm serious, Ben said. Skiers going missing, entire search parties finding nothing, weird reports of noises at night. Some people even claim to have seen figures moving in the woods. It was all written off as accidents or wild animals, but after a while, no one wanted to come here anymore. Lucy shivered despite her thick jacket. And yet, we're here. Ben gave a half smile. Hey, it sounded fun at the time. Jacques scoffed. You guys are letting some old stories freak you out. We haven't seen anything weird besides those tracks this morning. He motioned toward the abandoned lodge ahead. Let's check that out instead of scaring ourselves over ghost stories. Reluctantly, Lucy and Ben followed him toward the main lodge, stepping carefully through the snow-covered remains of the resort. The wooden structure loomed ahead, its paint peeling and roof sagging under years of harsh winters. The entrance doors had long since rotted away, leaving a dark, gaping void. Jacques stepped inside first, kicking aside debris. Nothing but dust and broken furniture. Lucy hesitated before entering, feeling as if they were intruding on something long forgotten. Ben followed, his flashlight sweeping across the room. Old tables, shattered glass, and remnants of a front desk remained. But the place was eerily devoid of life. No signs of squatters, no footprints in the thick layer of dust. It was as if no one had set foot here in years. "Check this out," Ben said, picking up a faded map from the floor. It showed the layout of the resort, including marked ski trails and emergency shelters. He pointed to one location circled in red. "Looks like there was a secondary cabin further up the mountain." "Think we should check it out?" Jock asked. Lucy hesitated, but Ben nodded. "Might be interesting." As they exited the lodge, the sun had dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of deep blue and gray. The wind had picked up slightly, whispering through the skeletal trees. Lucy glanced at their cabin in the distance. A strange feeling prickled at the back of her neck. For the first time, she had the distinct sensation that they were being watched. And as they returned to their temporary home for the night, she couldn't shake the thought that something out there in the snow was waiting for them. As the evening set in, Lucy, Ben, and Jock gathered around the small fire they had managed to start inside the abandoned cabin. The glow of the flames flickered against the wooden walls, casting long shadows that seemed to dance and stretch in unnatural ways. The outside world was silent, too silent. Even the wind, which had howled earlier, had died down to a hushed whisper. Ben checked his phone again, but as expected, there was no signal. Still nothing. No service, no messages, no way to contact anyone. Leaned back against the creaky wooden wall. "I told you guys, this place is just old and creepy. It's not haunted, and it's definitely not cursed. I mean, we've seen nothing actually scary." Lucy gave him a pointed look. "Except for the tracks this morning, and the claw marks on the door, and the fact that the entire resort was abandoned without a trace." Jock waved her off. "Could be an old bear. Could be some local pranksters messing with people." Ben shook his head. "Then where are the people? We walked through the whole place today, and there weren't even signs of animals. No nests, no birds, not even a single fresh footprint aside from ours." Lucy rubbed her arms, staring at the fire. "I don't like this." Jacques sighed. "We'll sleep, get up early, and head to that other cabin tomorrow. If nothing else, it'll be a fun hike. Maybe we'll find something interesting." The others nodded, though Lucy still felt uneasy. Outside, the cold pressed against the thin wooden walls, and an eerie quiet settled over the abandoned resort. Then in the distance, something let out a low, guttural sound. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't human. Ben sat up straight. "Did you hear that?" Lucy's breath caught in her throat. "Yeah." Jacques frowned. "Probably just the trees creaking." Another noise, closer this time. A deep, resonant thump, as if something large had shifted in the snow. Lucy reached for the flashlight, her hands trembling slightly. That wasn't a tree. Ben stood and slowly approached the boarded-up window, pressing his ear against the wooden planks. Outside, the night was thick with silence, and then another sound. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, and slow. Something was out there. Ben backed away from the window. "We're not alone." The fire crackled, casting eerie shadows on their faces. No one spoke. They listened, but the footsteps had already stopped. Something, or someone, was standing in the darkness, just beyond their sight, waiting. The cabin felt smaller as silence stretched between them. The weight of the unknown pressed down, making every small creak in the wooden floor seem unbearably loud. Ben exhaled slowly, his breath visible in the cold air. "Maybe it's just a moose," he whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. Jacques smirked, though there was nervous energy behind it. "A moose that walks on two legs?" Lucy swallowed hard. The heavy footsteps had been deliberate, methodical, not the uneven plod of an animal wandering the snow. Something had been moving outside, watching them. The three of them stayed frozen in place, listening. The only sound was the quiet crackling of the fire and the occasional gust of wind outside. Then, another noise, a soft crunch in the snow. Closer this time. Ben clenched his jaw and reached for his flashlight. "I'll check," he whispered, moving toward the window. Lucy grabbed his arm. "Are you insane? What if it's—" She hesitated. She didn't even know what to be afraid of. Ben gently pulled free and lifted the flashlight toward the boarded-up window. Carefully, he angled it so that just a sliver of light shone through a gap in the planks. Outside, the snow-covered landscape was still. Nothing moved. The skeletal remains of ski lifts loomed in the distance, their abandoned chairs swaying slightly in the breeze. The faint outlines of other cabins dotted the hillside, ghostly under the pale glow of the moon. "No one's there," Ben whispered. He started lowering the flashlight when something moved at the edge of the beam. A shape, just beyond the trees. Ben froze. His pulse thundered in his ears. He barely had time to process what he saw before the shape was gone, vanishing back into the darkness as if it had never been there. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Lucy gripped his arm. "See what?" "I don't know," Ben admitted. His stomach knotted. "But I swear, something was watching us." Jock exhaled sharply. "All right, that's enough for tonight. We're freaking ourselves out." He stood and dusted off his jeans. "Let's just get some rest and leave first thing in the morning. Whatever's out there, it hasn't bothered us yet." Yet. Lucy and Ben exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. The three of them moved their sleeping bags closer to the fire, trying to shake the unsettling feeling that they weren't alone. Outside, the wind howled again, and somewhere in the distance, hidden in the darkness, something listened. Something waited. The night passed in uneasy silence. Every creak of the old cabin, every howl of the wind outside, kept them on edge. But whatever had been out there never made another move, at least not one they could hear. By the time dawn broke, the fire had died down to glowing embers. Lucy was the first to wake, stretching stiff muscles as she sat up. Her breath fogged the cold air, and she pulled her blanket tighter around herself. Ben stirred next, rubbing his eyes. "Did we all survive the night?" he muttered groggily. Jock sat up, looking around. "Barely slept," he admitted. "I kept thinking I heard something." Lucy stood and moved toward the door, hesitating before unlatching it. "I just want to check outside, see if anything was actually there." Ben grabbed his flashlight and followed. Jock hesitated, then did the same. The moment Lucy pulled the door open, an icy breeze rushed in, sending a shiver down her spine. The morning light was gray and muted, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. Everything looked still, but then she saw it. Footprints. They weren't animal tracks. They were massive, larger than any human footprint, and spaced apart as if whoever made them had taken long, deliberate strides. The prints led from the tree line toward their cabin, and then circled it. Lucy's stomach dropped. "Do you see this?" Ben crouched down, pressing his gloved hand into one of the tracks. His hand barely covered half the print. "No way. This isn't normal." Jacques swallowed hard. "Maybe some other hikers were messing with us?" Lucy pointed at the depth of the prints. No human could leave tracks this deep. Whatever made these was heavy. Ben followed the trail with his eyes, watching as the prints disappeared into the trees. The memory of the shadow he'd seen the night before came flooding back. "I told you something was out here," he muttered. Jacques exhaled, rubbing his hands together. "All right, we wanted adventure. We got adventure. Now let's pack up and leave before this turns into something we regret." Lucy hesitated. A part of her wanted to go, badly. But another part was morbidly curious. What had been watching them? What left these tracks? She turned to Ben. "You think we should go?" Ben didn't answer right away. He stared at the footprints, jaw tight. Finally, he looked up and shook his head. "Not yet." Lucy's pulse quickened. "Why not?" Ben met her gaze. "Because if we leave now, we'll never know what's out there." A heavy silence settled over them. Jock groaned. "Oh, great. This is how horror movies start." Lucy and Ben exchanged glances. Maybe it was, but it was already too late to turn back. The three of them stood in the cold morning air, staring at the massive footprints embedded in the snow. The previous night's events replayed in their minds, the strange noises, the sense of being watched, and now undeniable proof that something had been lurking outside their cabin. Lucy finally broke the silence. "Okay, let's think this through. We came here for adventure, but this is something else." Ben crouched down and ran his fingers over the edge of one of the prints. The snow had slightly hardened overnight, preserving the shape. If this were a bear or some other animal, we'd see claw marks, but these look almost human, just way too big. Jacques shook his head, rubbing his arms. "I don't care what it is. I just know we shouldn't still be here." He turned back toward the cabin. "We pack up and leave. Simple." But it wasn't simple. Ben stood up, his face tense. "Jacques, even if we want to leave, how? The storm knocked out our signal. If the roads are blocked, we could get stranded somewhere even worse. Jacques frowned, but didn't argue. He knew Ben was right. They were isolated. Lucy glanced back at the footprints. Let's at least follow them a little, just to see if they lead anywhere. Jacques groaned. Terrible idea. Ben sighed. She's right. If there's a chance someone else is out here, we need to know. If we find nothing, we head back and figure out a way down the mountain. Jacques hesitated, but eventually gave in. Fine. But the second we see something we don't like, we run. They followed the tracks cautiously, stepping carefully through the snow. The trail led deeper into the trees, weaving between frost-covered pines. The further they walked, the quieter everything became. Even the usual sounds of the forest, distant bird calls, the rustling of branches, seemed to vanish. Lucy tightened her grip on her coat. "Why is it so quiet?" she whispered. Ben glanced around, his unease growing. "I don't know, but I don't like it." Jacques muttered, "That's because nature is telling us to leave." The footprints continued, leading them to a small clearing. There, in the center of the snow, was something that made their blood run cold. A pile of bones. They weren't human, at least they didn't look like it, but they were large, cracked, and stripped clean. Scattered around them were tufts of fur, frozen in the snow. Lucy swallowed hard. Something killed here. Ben knelt down, inspecting the remains. A deer, maybe, or something bigger. He picked up one of the bones, turning it over in his hand. Deep grooves lined the surface, bite marks. Jacques took a step back. "Okay, that's enough. We're done." But Ben wasn't listening. His eyes were locked onto something near the edge of the clearing, a tree trunk with deep, jagged scratches running down its bark. The marks were huge, spaced far apart. Lucy followed his gaze. Those weren't made by any normal animal. Jacques grabbed her arm. "Then let's not wait around to see what made them." For once, Ben didn't argue. They turned and made their way back toward the cabin, moving quickly. The air felt heavier, like the woods were closing in around them. And then, just as they neared the cabin, a branch snapped somewhere behind them. They all froze. Lucy's heart pounded in her chest. Tell me that was just the wind. No one answered. Ben slowly turned his head, eyes scanning the trees. Jacques clenched his jaw. Then, from deep within the forest, a low, guttural sound rumbled through the air, a sound that did not belong to any animal they knew, and it was close. The noise lingered in the air, vibrating through their bones, a low growl that was unlike anything any of them had ever heard. It was deep, almost resonating with the earth itself, a sound so primal it felt like it was coming from the very depths of the forest. Lucy's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Ben, her eyes wide. "What was that?" Ben didn't answer right away. He was listening, his eyes scanning the trees, trying to locate the source of the sound. His face was pale. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's not good." Jacques was already moving, backing toward the cabin. His voice was shaky. "We need to go. Now." But the growl grew louder. Closer. The trees around them seemed to shift, the shadows deepening, as if something were moving just beyond their sight. Then, in a blur of motion, something crashed through the underbrush, a dark, hulking shape, moving too fast to be anything human. All three of them froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The thing in the woods stopped just at the edge of their vision, standing still like it was watching them. The silence was deafening. Lucy whispered, "What is it?" Ben swallowed hard. "I don't know, but it's not a bear." Jacques was visibly shaking now, his eyes darting nervously between the trees. "We need to get inside. We have to get inside. Now!" They turned and ran toward the cabin, but the creature was faster. It darted through the trees, its large form a blur of movement, and before they knew it, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps behind them. It was following them. Panic surged in their veins. They reached the cabin and yanked open the door, rushing inside and slamming it shut behind them. The lock clicked into place, but the sound of the creature's approach was still loud in their ears. It was outside, close. Lucy pressed her back against the door, her hands trembling. "What the hell is that thing?" Ben ran to the window, peering out through a crack in the curtains. His breath fogged up the glass. It's not human." He shook his head in disbelief. "It's massive, bigger than any bear I've ever seen." Jacques backed away from the door, grabbing a chair and wedging it beneath the doorknob, though he knew it wouldn't do much to stop whatever was outside. "We have to figure out what the hell it is." And soon, for what felt like hours, the creature circled the cabin, its heavy steps thudding against the snow. Every now and then, they would hear a low growl or the sound of claws scraping against wood. Ben and Lucy remained at the window, watching the woods outside, hoping for any sign of a way out. But there was nothing. Only darkness and the distant sound of the creature moving through the trees. Jacques sat on the floor, his eyes wide with fear. What if it's still out there when we try to leave? Lucy looked at him, her face pale. We can't stay here forever. We'll starve or freeze to death. Ben clenched his fists. We have to stay calm. Think, maybe we can lure it away. A sudden bang on the door made them all jump. The creature had struck the cabin with enough force to rattle the entire structure. A growl erupted from outside, louder and closer than ever. It was angry now. Lucy's voice was shaky. What if it breaks in? Ben gripped the window frame. We're going to be fine. We just need to hold out a little longer until the storm dies down. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm of fear that churned inside the cabin. They all knew that as long as the creature was out there, they weren't safe. They could hear it sniffing at the door now, its breath heavy and ragged. The realization hit them all at once. Whatever it wasn't just some wild animal. It was something else, something that was hunting them. The end of part 1.